Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for sparing 20 minutes today to join me as I take a very quick tour of how hackers are more likely at this time of year when everyone's rushing to finish the final few tasks before Christmas to try and slip a business email compromise attack past you. I'm your host, Claire Holmes, Head of Marketing here at Redsift. So in the next 20 minutes, I'll be taking a look at what business email compromise is, otherwise known as BEC, and why it remains the biggest threat facing companies today. Then we'll move on to some of the technical solutions you may or may not currently be using to tackle it. However, as some recent stats will show, these aren't a watertight solution as people are still losing money and data. So finally, what are some practical steps you can look into over the festive season to stop hackers from ruining your holidays? So this report from insurer AIG shows that nearly 1/4 of claims they received over the past 12 months. In most cases, the compromise can be traced back to a phishing email containing a link or attachment. If the recipient engages with the content of a phishing email, it may allow intrusion into the user's inbox. The majority of users are familiar with the concept of phishing emails, but there remains a high number of incidents where the user follows a link directing the recipient to a bogus login screen. As soon as the victim enters their credentials, they are captured by the cybercriminal who then has the necessary information to log into the victim's email account. The perpetrator is then able to send and receive emails from the victim's email address and access all the information in their email inbox. In many cases, the BEC is exacerbated by malware that spreads the scam to contacts in the recipient's inbox. A relatively simple type of scam, BEC attackers often target individuals responsible for sending payments, using spoof accounts to impersonate the company's C-suite or supplier and requesting money transfers, tax records, and/or other sensitive data. BEC attacks are often successful because they use social engineering to create emails that appear legitimate, or sometimes if an email domain is unprotected, hackers can impersonate the exact email address, so there's no dodgy rendering in the email address to serve as a clue. But more on that later. If we take a look at the next few groups of incidents, it's interesting to see that all of them can be carried out as a result of a successful BEC attack. From one successful phishing email, there's a whole load of trouble that can follow. All these incidents I've highlighted often start with a phishing email. For example, ransomware deployed by a malicious attachment on an email that looks like it comes from HR, data accessed by hackers because someone followed a link in a phishing email that stole their login credentials. Impersonation fraud is possible thanks to unprotected domains, allowing hackers to send an email that looks like it comes from the CEO and asks for money to be paid out. But what is the real-world impact of these incidents? Sometimes the stats around BEC can feel so dizzyingly large as to be unrelatable. These figures on the right-hand side from the FBI's IC3 report on crime are the perfect example. The total amount is more than most companies will make in a year or even a decade. So if we turn to look at the average cost, it's first important to state how hard it is to get a true average due to the fact a lot of companies don't want to admit they've been hacked and what it costs them, both in terms of real money and impact on operations. For example, not being able to trade as they are locked out of their systems. This means a lot of data that's available only represents those with cyber insurance, as they are incentivized to disclose how much an incident has cost them in the hope they will get the money back. With that caveat in mind, let's take a look at what we know. The insurer Hiscox shared a staggering increase in the mean figure for losses associated with all cyber incidents among firms that reported attacks. In 2018, it was 229,000, whereas in 2019, it shot up 61% to 369,000, with medium and large firms bearing a disproportionate amount of the cost. One of the most striking figures to emerge is the mean cost of the largest single incident. A year ago, this came out at 34,000. This year, there has been a near six-fold increase to a fraction under $200,000. For companies in every size bracket, the cost of the biggest incident is now likely to be anything from 3 to 18 times what it was only a year ago. The figures tally with broader industry data that suggest a sharp rise in the scale of ransom demands, for example, over the past year. So what kind of thing should you expect to see in a Beck attack? Outlined here is an extremely common scam. It uses several tactics to get past your defenses and make sure it's actioned. Firstly, they have targeted a company with an unprotected domain, as this allows them to impersonate the @ part of the email address. This immediately removes one red flag often present on phishing emails. Secondly, they take on the persona of the CEO, someone with authority in the business, in the hope that the recipient will respond without questioning. Finally, the hacker has created a sense of urgency by adding the pressure of a very important deal and the need for this to be done ASAP. These sorts of tactics explain why the UK government's 2018 Cybersecurity Breaches Survey found that completing wire transfers impersonating the CEO have consistently increased. And one of the UK's major banks, Barclays, went as far as to say in their 2019 fraud advice stats that 1 in 10 said they wouldn't know how to spot a fake invoice. Only 25% of employees said they double-check an invoice before even paying it. This explains why the likes of Google and Facebook were tricked out of $123 million, not to mention the 1 in 7 SMEs in the last 12 months for whom paying a fake invoice can be a business-ending scenario. Given these scams rely on humans being the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain, what technology can we put in place to reduce the likelihood of these emails ever being sent or reaching people? Because for the last 40 years, since the inception of email, we've been told to simply accept that email has a fundamental security flaw. Let's start at the beginning and the architecture of a simple email. I use the word simple on purpose, for it is the lack of inherent security in its build that makes the email open to impersonation. And we're not talking about some wonkily looking misspelt email address, but the ability to trick receivers into displaying a perfectly rendered replica of an email address. Because of this, the first line of defense to come about is the none too subtle filters and gateways. These rule-based bits and kits aren't infallible, though, which is why the rise in phishing training has quickly followed to supplement technology with some good old-fashioned human thinking. However, I think it's clear this still isn't working. So, what are 3 things you can do to reduce your risk of Beck? Two-factor authentication is swiftly becoming a key way to reduce the compromise of not just email accounts, but any online portal, including banking, storage, and shopping. Before I get into what 2FA is, let me explain why a simple or even complex password is just not enough anymore. Humans have lousy memories. A recent report looked at over 1.4 billion stolen passwords and found that most were embarrassingly simple. Among the worst are 11111, 1234556, 123456789, QWERTY, and password. So while these are easy to remember, any decent hacker could crack these simple passwords in no time. Too many accounts. So as users get more comfortable with doing everything online, they open more and more accounts. This eventually creates too many passwords to remember and paves the way for a dangerous habit, password recycling. Here's why hackers love this trend. It takes just seconds for hacking software to test thousands of stolen sign-in credentials against popular online banks and shopping sites. If a username and password pair is recycled, it is extremely likely it'll unlock plenty of other lucrative accounts. Thirdly, security fatigue sets in. To protect themselves, some consumers try to make it harder for attackers by creating more complex passwords and passphrases. But with so many data breaches flooding the dark web with user information, many just give up and fall back to using weak passwords across multiple accounts. What 2FA gives businesses and its employees is an extra layer of security used to make sure that people trying to gain access to an online account are who they actually say they are. Typically, a user will first enter their username and password, and then instead of immediately gaining access, they will be required to provide another piece of information. This second factor could come from one of the following categories. Firstly, something you know. This could be a personal identification number, so a PIN, which is a password that answers secret questions or a specific keystroke pattern. Number two, something you have. Typically, a user would have something in their possession, like a credit card, a smartphone, or a small hardware token. Or thirdly, something you are. This category is a bit more advanced and might include biometric pattern of a fingerprint, an iris scan, or a voice print. With two-factor authentication, a potential compromise of just one of these factors won't unlock the account. So even if your password is stolen or your phone is lost, the chances of someone else having your second factor information is highly unlikely. Looking at it from another angle, if a consumer uses 2FA correctly, websites and apps can be more confident of the user's identity and unlock the account. So if you haven't already, I'd strongly recommend you switch it on for any and all accounts you can. So I was perhaps a bit mean earlier when I said people are the weakness link in your cybersecurity because how can you expect people to know what to do if you've never told them what to look out for or how to respond? This is why step number 2 should be to run some form of cybersecurity training. Your company may already be running cybersecurity training on a regular basis. Often this is required if your company has an accreditation like ISO 27001. This may take the form of computer-based training once a year or something much more involved like phishing simulation, whereby fake phishing emails are sent out to staff to test their propensity to click. What you need to remember is that almost everyone in a business will have a reason to access and respond to emails, from the obvious, like the finance department sorting out invoices and payroll, to the not so obvious, like the front desk staff who receive daily emails about visitors or deliveries. This means you shouldn't think about cybersecurity being one particular team's problem or area of expertise. Hackers will look for the most vulnerable entry point into your organization and therefore are highly unlikely to target the IT or security teams, instead focusing on time-pressed, busy employees who perhaps won't always have cybersecurity at the forefront of their minds. So if you're not already helping your people to learn how to spot the signs of a Beck email amongst other cyber threats, what can you do? Well, the good news is that there are a few things you can take a look at that cost absolutely nothing and will help raise awareness across the business. So I've outlined a few of those here. The final thing I'm going to recommend definitely falls on the more technical end of the spectrum, so maybe something you need to talk to your security or IT team about. But there are a number of security protocols that you can configure for your email sending services that will help stop phishing attacks. They do this by protecting your email domain. So at redshift.com, for example, against impersonation. The hacker can't use it to carry out a Beck attack that relies on email impersonation. That's where the from address of the email is an exact replica of a genuine address at your company. There are 3 open industry standards that you should know about. Firstly, the Sender Policy Framework, so SPF. This is a protocol that validates if a server is authorized to send emails on behalf of a domain. Think of it like a guest list at a party, so you can only come in if your name is on the list. Number 2, Domain Keys Identified Mail stands for DKIM. This is a digital signature that confirms the email content has not been tampered with, and it's kind of like a hotel key card. You can only enter if the code on the magnetic stripe on the card matches what's stored in the door lock. So it's like a digital signature. And number 3, DMARC. So DMARC builds on SPF and DKIM, adding a reporting and enforcement function that allows senders to block fraudulent email that uses their domains in an attempt to fool recipients into thinking it's legitimate. Think of it like a bouncer on the door at a party, checking that guests have a key card and are on the guest list, stopping any party crashers coming in. Most importantly, they let you know at the end of the night who showed up and tried to get in so you can stop it happening again. So if you can get all these configured on your DNS and email sending services, what you can expect to happen is you'll get your email locked down. So all your legitimate emails, the ones you've added to your guest list and given the key to, will experience improved deliverability as receiving email servers know for certain that you are who you say you are, and fraudulent email will be blocked. Conversely, you can see that email that fail these checks, or the fake spoof emails, they will be booted out to spam folders or will be fully blocked and not delivered at all, therefore protecting your employees, customers, and partners from phishing emails that look to use your email identity to trick them into sending money or data. So now I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Redsift are able to help you on your journey to email protection. I won't labor the point too much, but our products on DMARC and on Inbox are perfect for helping to reduce BEC attacks through implementing those vital email security protocols and clearly marking inbound emails with warnings should they be suspicious. So to sum up, now that we have a few moments, so that's really the end of the presentation here. If you're interested to learn more, do feel free to reach us at marketing@redsift.io or .com, .com, sorry, or contact@redsift.com. Feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to give you a demo of the on DMARC and on Inbox solutions, and to answer any questions about this presentation at all. Thanks so much for giving me your time today, and I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to reach us via email if there's any questions at all. Have a lovely day.